Okay, now we got our layout of everything we need. 16 gauge wire, 3 flag crimp connectors, 2 male crimp connectors, 2 12mm M4s, 1 20mm M4, 10K ohm resistor, your spring for your button clip, button retainer, button, and then your Bauer tool side, and your Dewalt battery side. So one of the first things I do is I trim up these flag crimp connectors, these female ones. And 2 out of the 3 you're just cutting right along this seam here. Sometimes these little flush cuts don't work. I'll just cut it with this. Ideally, which I have one, but I'm just trying to do it the way somebody who doesn't have the proper tools would. Ideally though, like I've done in the past, I just trim them with a Dremel. Little cutting wheel on there. But a little trimming with these tools works too. Thing pretty, you just need it to be opened up like so. So your battery can slide in there. Well, actually your tool end prongs will slide in there. And I'm gonna go ahead and trim up the other 2. The one that'll go on your sensing pin on your tool is going to need cut in half right here at the crimp, and then down the side here since it's a shorter prong. Okay, that's how they should look once they're all trimmed up. 2 normal width, and then 1 shorter for that sensing pin on the tool. So, I don't know if you can see that in the battery. You want it facing up like that, so you're actually crimping into it from the back side, like so. Okay, so that one gets crimped like so. And then your 10K ohm resistor gets crimped in. I'll fold, because it's super thin wire, I fold it into like 2 or 3 times. Before I crimp it into. So, kind of like that. And then that gets crimped in like so. So I like to crimp all the wires on, and then I'll show you how to position it in the tool side adapter before you put the glue in. And you want to have it on the tool so these can be sitting on the tool pins whenever the glue sets, so then they won't move, and they should go onto the tool pins every time. But kind of have to finagle the crimpers on. Okay, so then that's crimped in there, And then because I'm not using the proper crimpers, I got to reshape this a little bit and straighten it out. And then you have your negative side on the tool. The end that goes on the tool gets crimped in to the other side of your 10k ohm resistor. And then that gets crimped on. Okay. Just like so. And it'll go into it like that. Okay. Then you crimp your positive side. Let me make sure I got this set right. Okay. Well, I got it all backwards, but you'll see here in a sec. Okay. So then your positive side of your tool adapter lines up with this groove right here, so that your positive goes on this side from underneath. And that just slips in like so. And then your negative will go in like so, with your, just like that. Okay, so then we're going to put this onto the tool and put this side onto the battery, and then we're going to pour glue in there to set those in place. Pay attention to the orientation that you clip the crimps at. I like to have them like so. I don't know if I can get that to focus or not, but I see I have the one wall on this side of the terminal and then this wall on this side of the terminal for these two. It doesn't really matter much for the sensing pin. Now, as you can see, these pins are all set on the tool pins in place. I can't, you can see that. You got your 10k ohm resistor going to your negative terminal, and then over to your sensing pin, and then your positive terminal is just stuck on there. And then same thing, your male ends are shoved into the battery right now, and it's ready to lay the glue in. So okay, so keep mixing up the glue until it's all consistent color together. And then you only got about 5 minutes before it starts to set up, so I just take a throwaway butter knife, and I kind of dab the glue up like this, and then I'll lay it in there liberally. Try to get it everywhere so it doesn't mess with your tolerances when you're sliding the two halves together. little bit on there. I'm gonna have to sacrifice some fingertips. A toothpick works really good too for getting down in these crevices down here. Okay, so I've tried a couple of different methods with the painter's tape, and basically it doesn't work with the 5-minute clear weld because it's just too runny. As it sets up, it'll run down in there and get on the tool or on the battery side. So what I recommend doing if you're going to use the clear weld, if you use the that 7-hour set JB Weld epoxy that's like got the actual steel resin in it, that stuff's a little stiffer. You don't have to worry about it as much, but if it does get on your tool, you're pretty much donezo. So if you're going to use the clear weld, the best thing that I found that works the best is take some hot glue and shove some hot glue down around the connectors just to hold them in place and to pretty much seal up that cavity so the clear resin doesn't get down inside where you don't want it to. So you just put a layer to fill up the dead space down on the connectors and to seal that up with hot glue, and then pour resin over top to hold everything in place permanently. And then before the hot glue fully sets up, just kind of take some kind of needle point tool and shove it around in the areas like that, just to kind of work it around and seal up anywhere where you don't want the resin to go. Okay. So what I do is I just take my flush cuts and I just snip away all the little hairs and wisps of hot glue there. And then it's about time to start mixing up your epoxy. And then obviously you just repeat the process on the Dewalt battery side. You just fill in all the crevices. And then I found even though it's 5-minute epoxy, it doesn't fully set and cure until like honestly maybe even like 6 hours, depending on how warm the room is, before it's like actually rock solid how you would expect JB Weld to be. So we're gonna mix up some epoxy and then start laying it all down in there. Here, I'll trim this up a little bit. Mixing epoxy tool is just a plastic throwaway knife. Unless you're dealing with smaller stuff, then a toothpick's my go-to. And I'd probably mix up like a 50-cent piece dab of resin and then equal parts hardener. That's probably enough. And then obviously repeat for the battery side of the adapter. If you want, mix just a hair more hardener in there, because it's not like it has to be super structural. So if you want to set up a little quicker, just add a little extra hardener. Okay, and then just take a big old glob of it. and then just let it kind of pour into that cavity. I literally let it pour off the knife and let it settle on its own. You might, depending on what tool you're using, you kind of want to angle it up towards the prongs of the tool so that resin stays on that end of the wiring cavity in there. Okay, and then once you got most of it in there, you got to let that set. And then we'll get to the next part. Okay, so still just something to keep in mind. Make sure you're definitely really sealing up down in these crevices, because I don't know why, I've probably made at least half a dozen of these adapters for myself and friends and family and stuff. And pretty much the only time I seem to have the glue seep through is when I'm trying to make a video for you guys. But just keep that in mind. What I did is I noticed that it was a little hard to move the adapter on the tool after the glue was set, not fully cured, just starting to set up, and I slowly pulled it off the tool so I didn't move the stay-cons, and then I just cut this off with an X-Acto knife and some flush cuts when it's still like a little gummy and tacky. But it still worked out okay. All the clearances are still good, and the stay-cons are still in place for going onto the prongs of the tool. Okay, so I got it all set up to solder up. You can either solder the wires together like I'm about to do, which is how I prefer to do it, but you can also just take butt connectors, crimp butt connectors, put them on, and then just crimp them together. I've done it both ways. Either way works. It just sometimes seems like it's a little harder to stuff everything into the allotted cavity with the butt connectors, but it is doable. So I'm going to get these wires soldered up, and then we will move on to the next step. Okay, so I got those wires soldered up. One thing I might have forgot to mention, with Dewalt batteries and the Bauer tools, the positive and negative terminal line up straight across with the negative and positive terminals on the Bauer. So whenever you are connecting these wires together, you just go straight across. You have your negative that has your 10k ohm resistor attached to it, go straight to your negative pin on the battery, and then positive is just a straight connection over. And the only reason why we solder it and not just do one wire is just for ease of putting everything together. It's easier to do it in two halves and then mate them together than try to do it in one piece. So now we're just going to take all the wire and just stuff it inside the cavity here. And then I have this little cutout here so you can shove the spade connector straight down into the cavity like so. And you pretty much just push down and then slide it into place. And then that's the two halves put together, and then you take your 20mm M4, and it slots right on down. Okay, and then your 12mm M4. To be honest, I'm using a 10mm, not a 12mm, even though the plans call for a 12 just because I didn't have any. The 10 works, but it just doesn't have as much thread depth to bite in. But it works in a pinch, but you're better off with 12mm just so you have more threads grabbing. And then you just want to sink those all the way down. And then also for longevity of use, it'd be best to put like some blue Loctite on the threads. All I have on me is red Loctite, and I don't really want to put permanent Loctite on there right now. But just crank those down. then if you want, at this point, you can throw a battery on and test it in the tool, but for the video, we're going to put the button on next. Okay, and then for this part, you just need your spring, your button clip, and the button retainer. If you look super close, there's a tiny little fillet here. It doesn't really matter, but that goes on the outside facing you whenever you slot the retainer in. So what I do is I will stick the spring into the button, and then the reason why it has this little angle here is so it can slot in. I don't know if you can see that. It slots in like so, pretty much hooks in, and then I just use my finger to compress the spring to slide it over the little spring retainer that's underneath, and then that should be it. Okay, and then you so what I've done both ways, which the way I'm going to do it now is I'm just going to use some super glue and accelerator to glue it in place, but what would be best for longevity is to mix up a little bit of your 5-minute epoxy and then just put a tiny bead across this edge here with like a toothpick, but you just want a tiny amount because you don't want too much squeeze out on the backside to where it could stick to your button. So just a minimal amount in the joint, and then what I do is I'll take whatever's left and pretty much coat it on the outside there and make like a layer around the seam. And that my first adapter that I ever made, I've had for probably 2 years now, and I've never had a problem with it. So, but for the video purposes, I'm just going to use some super glue and pretty much do that instantly. Then you just want to make sure that it stays lined up with this outside edge. Okay, and then I'm just going to spray it with a little bit of accelerator. Or a lot of accelerator. And then that's it. And then you have your button. Okay. And then all it's left to do is test your fitment, make sure everything lines up and goes how it's supposed to. You can see it slots into the tool. Should just click in. That button's locked in. It's not going anywhere. And slot your Dewalt battery on. And you have a working tool. Alright, I hope that helps. Thanks for watching.